Welcome. Today we're embarking on a really crucial tactical deep dive. We're looking at a concept that I think could redefine how developers, how solopreneurs should be approaching building, a truly lucrative business. This isn't about chasing the next viral trend, not at all. It's about exploiting systemic, almost unglamorous inefficiencies for real compounding revenue. And we were incredibly fortunate to get access, unprecedented access really, to a tactical blueprint. It's an unreleased guide known only as Boring Problems, Big Money.
It's a fantastic source. It lays out this powerful, almost counterintuitive approach to building a microsauce.
It really is.
Right.
And before we unpack the core thesis, we just have to offer a massive thank you to the ex-freelancer owner who permitted us this look. I mean, look behind the curtain like this.
It's so rare.
It's so rare to get this level of commercially potent, just honest strategy.
Yeah, without the usual hustle culture veneer on top of it.
Exactly. So our entire focus today is going to be distilled right down to the core philosophy that underpins this entire book. It's called the boring problem theory.
Right.
And our mission here is to understand why focusing on these friction points that just sound dull. I'm talking about things like messy data reconciliation or inventory synchronization, why that is the most predictable path to scale.
And critically, why the biggest tech companies on the planet actively ignore this gold mine.
Yes, leaving this perfect vacuum for you, the architect, to step in and fill.
That structural insight is really the key. It unlocks everything else we're going to discuss. The starting point for most founders is it's fundamentally flawed. Because they look in the wrong direction. Yeah. When most people, especially developers, decide to build a product, they aim for the sexy. They aim for the disruptive, the visionary.
You want to be the next big thing.
Precisely. They want to create an application that fundamentally alters the way users behave or interact or even think.
Okay, so let's unpack that. The first mandate of this boring problem theory is, well, it's pretty simple. It says, stop doing this.
Just stop.
Stop chasing the idea that requires you to change deep-seated user behavior. The book has a great name for this path. It calls it, quite accurately, the build trap.
Exactly. I mean, just think about the sheer energy required to convince someone to switch their daily habits.
Right.
To get them to adopt a new social network or maybe a new complex productivity methodology. It's a monumental task.
You're not just competing with other apps at that point.
No. You're competing with established billion-dollar companies, sure, but you're also competing with something much stronger.
Human inertia.
Human inertia itself. And to overcome that, you need massive, massive capital for education, for marketing, for years and years of feature iteration. It's a high-stress, high-failure environment that is just perfectly designed to drain time, capital, and all your mental energy, especially for a solo founder.
So the build trap isn't just about picking a bad idea. It's about this fatal misalignment between the resources of a solopreneur and the sheer scale of the behavioral change they're trying to engineer.
That's right. But the book suggests this mistake, this pull towards the build trap. It stems from something deeper, something in the freelancer's DNA.
Ah, okay. Let's get into that.
It connects directly to the problem of leverage. The common path for a successful developer or consultant is to get really proficient, right? You raise your hourly rate and you start trading your single finite resource, your time for money. And you might charge $500, maybe even $1,000 an hour, which on the surface seems fantastic. But inevitably, you hit what the book calls the linearity wall.
The linearity wall. I want to dwell on this because I feel like this is the existential crisis for every single solopreneur. Tell us exactly how this wall, how it shows up.
It's the absolute limit of your professional utilization. You are trapped. It's that simple. If you're billing 40 hours a week, you cannot bill 50 without complete burnout. It's not sustainable.
And even if you do, that's your ceiling.
That's your ceiling. If you charge, say, $20,000 to solve a really complex client problem, that transaction is completely offset by the 40 hours of your life you can never, ever recover. You might be the high-priced architect, yes, but you are also the laborer pouring the concrete.
I love that analogy.
Your economic output has completely flatlined because your margins are just ruthlessly capped by your one available resource, time.
So the moment you stop coding, the revenue stops flowing.
Precisely. You are selling time, and time is fundamentally non-scalable.
Right. And historically, escaping that trap required a ton of capital, hiring a whole engineering team, spending years perfecting some complex piece of code, or, the holy grail, securing VC funding.
Which comes with its own set of problems. But the core insight of this Bohr ratings problem theory offers a different path. a better parallel path to leverage, one that targets the structural fragility that actually underpins the entire global economy.
That fragility brings us to the real danger then. The universal competitor that you're actually fighting against isn't another startup. It's the financial and compliance risk that is just inherent in the status quo.
Yes, the global economy doesn't actually run on highly optimized, beautiful, modern code. We wish it did.
We really do.
It runs, chaos and all, on what the book calls the spreadsheet economy.
The spreadsheet economy. This insight from the blueprint is phenomenal.
It's everything. Think about it. 4 billion active users across just Excel and Google Sheets. 4 billion.
That's an unbelievable number.
It is the invisible, chaotic engine that powers small businesses, Fortune 500 companies, governments, everything in between. It is this layer of operations that is absolutely rife with manual data entry, brittle workflows, broken formulas.
And I would imagine the pervasive anxiety of the quarter end or the month end close.
Oh, absolutely. It is catastrophic economic inefficiency executed at a mind-boggling scale.
And here is where it gets really interesting. Because this isn't just some theoretical friction, some minor annoyance. This is a quantifiable disaster that justifies immediate spending. The source cites academic research confirming that approximately, what was the number?
94%.
94% of business spreadsheets contain material errors.
That number 94%, it should shock every single listener. It's not a typo.
That's almost all of them.
It means that nearly every financial forecast, every critical inventory log, every complex payroll calculation spreadsheet being run right now is fundamentally flawed. And we are talking about critical material errors, not minor typos.
Right, not a spelling mistake in a header.
Exactly. These errors are not just annoying, they are catastrophic. They sometimes lead to outright business failure or massive public losses.
And that very inefficiency, that constant low-grade terror of the 94%, that is the architect's gold mine. Let's take a moment to reflect on the real-world consequence of this. The high-profile disaster stories are out there.
They are. The blueprint details one of the most famous examples to really quantify this risk, the Norway Sovereign Wealth Fund.
One of the largest investment funds on the planet. We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars under management.
And they suffered a loss quantified at $92 million.
Wow.
And the cause? A single date formatting mistake in a spreadsheet.
A date formatting mistake, not a complex algorithmic error. A date format.
That's it. And that mistake wasn't caught because the internal system required manual review, manual copying and pasting. When you look at that case, you realize the spreadsheet itself is this highly specialized piece of software, right? It's capable of incredibly sophisticated analysis, but it remains structurally isolated. It's an island.
And that isolation is what demands the manual data entry, the copying, which is what introduces the human error at scale. A consultant might come in and solve one version of that problem for $10,000, but the core inefficiency is still there.
It remains, forcing the next client and the next to face the exact same manual catastrophic risk.
Look, this is why the spreadsheet is the perfect antagonist for the microservice architect.
It is. It forces people into these workflows where they have to rely on fragile, non-auditable processes. The problem isn't that people don't want software. It's that the systems they already rely on, the spreadsheets, are too fragile, too error-prone, and crucially, not connected to the real-time web.
So your job isn't to invent a new operating system for their business.
No. Your job is to fix that broken connective tissue, to automate the boring, dangerous, manual step.
Okay, so we have the pain. It's the crippling fear of that 94% error rate. How do we pivot our thinking from that freelancer mentality, selling time, to a founder mentality to address that specific pain?
The core of the Bohr ratings problem theory mandates this fundamental pivot in the founder's mindset, and they articulate it perfectly in the book. It's simple. Stop selling vitamins, start selling antibiotics.
That framing is so instantly clarifying. I think we are all drawn to building features that are just nice to have. A vitamin is purely discretionary. You can think of a new team synergy visualization tool, or maybe a sophisticated dashboard that gives you a marginal aesthetic improvement on a metric people don't even check every day.
It might win design awards. It might look great in a portfolio.
Sure, but it doesn't solve a core survival problem.
And so when budgets inevitably get tight, and they always do, the vitamin is the very first thing to be cut from the budget. The buyer asks, can we live without this? And the answer is almost always yes.
But an antibiotic is different.
An antibiotic solves acute life-threatening pain right now. The problem you are fixing must be a raging fever, not a low-grade ache.
So we're talking about things like a compliance disaster.
A compliance disaster, a critical inventory stockout that threatens to halt all sales, a payroll error that risks employee trust and legal action.
Or, as you mentioned, the agonizing manual friction of data reconciliation that keeps financial professionals awake at 2 in the morning.
Exactly. Let's focus on reconciliation for a second, because
Yeah.
the book really hammers this point home.
Yeah, let's do that. For anyone who might be unfamiliar, reconciliation is just the process of comparing different ledgers or data sources. So, say, your bank statement and your internal accounting software
To make sure they match.
to make sure they match. It's unglamorous, it's repetitive, and it is absolutely essential. If it's wrong, the consequence is not just a minor loss.
No, it's an audit. It's a regulatory fine. It's a job-threatening consequence for the person responsible.
It is the ultimate boring high-stakes problem.
It is. You are selling liability mitigation. You're selling structural integrity. The blueprint emphasizes this idea of what it calls digital anthropology.
Digital anthropology.
Yeah, stalking accountants and logistics managers in their natural habitat.
Okay, so
Yeah.
forums, Slack groups, subreddits.
Exactly. And hunting for keywords that reveal professional shame and desperation.
Wait, hold on. So you're saying the strategy is to literally look for people's professional shame and fear. I mean, isn't that a little exploitative?
Yeah.
Or is it just efficient market analysis of genuine quantified pain?
It's efficient market analysis. We're not manufacturing the fear. The fear is already baked into the 94% error rate and the constant threat of an audit. You are merely observing where that fear forces them into poor manual coping mechanisms.
And what do you find when you do that?
The book cites the discovery of a specific tribal dialect term that they found. The term is the plug.
The plug, what is that?
The plug is a fabricated, estimated number. Often it's just a placeholder that's inserted into a ledger to force the balance sheet to balance when the real data doesn't align.
So it's a fudge factor.
It's a moment of pure professional desperation. It happens when variance detection is too manual, it's too slow, and they need to close the books now. It is a confession of failure in the underlying systems.
That is fascinating. So when you find a professional confessing online, somewhere in a forum, that they're forced to use a plug every single month because their manual reconciliation process is broken.
You haven't just identified a user.
You've identified a multi-million-dollar product roadmap.
Exactly. Your solution doesn't need to be aesthetically pleasing. It doesn't need a slick UI. It just needs to eliminate the professional and the compliance need for that plug.
You are selling the cessation of anxiety.
That's the product. And this is where the architectural insight really comes into play. Why are these acute, boring problems actively ignored by the giants like Microsoft or Google? Why are they left perfectly accessible to you, the solo architect?
This brings us to the structural advantage of what's called the long tail.
Yes. Giants like Microsoft, Google, or even large enterprise SaaS providers like Salesforce, they operate on a billion-user scale. Their product development costs are astronomical.
They have board meetings, hundreds of engineers, product managers.
The whole apparatus. They absolutely cannot justify dedicating an engineering team and a multi-year roadmap to a problem that only affects a niche of, say, 50,000 users. It simply doesn't move their needle. They are hunting the billion-dollar whale.
And in doing so, they overlook the highly profitable school of fish. But let me push back on that a bit. If Google and Microsoft are ignoring these problems, doesn't that imply the problems are actually too minor or maybe too custom to bother with, even for a solo founder?
No, and that's the fallacy that their scale relies on. The problems are incredibly acute for the user, but the market size is too small for the giant's business model.
Okay, give me an example.
Take the example of Amazon's Seller Central data synchronization. That process is notoriously messy. A problem affecting 50,000 Amazon sellers, like synchronizing their sales data directly into their private inventory spreadsheet, that might generate, say, $1 million in annual recurring revenue.
$1 million ARR.
For Amazon, that's a rounding error. They have bigger fish to fry, so they won't build a robust niche solution for it. But for a solo architect, that $1 million ARR niche, that's the holy grail. That's leverage.
So this creates a lucrative vacuum, the long tail of business pain, where only the Microsoft architect can profitably serve that market.
And what's making this even more accessible right now is this convergence matrix of modern technology.
The barrier to entry has just dissolved.
Absolutely. We are talking about the complete commoditization of infrastructure costs. The solo founder no longer needs to master complex server management or authentication protocols or database schema. Those used to be the biggest friction points.
Right. You're talking about platforms like Google Apps Script, low-code tools, and now the integration of AI for code generation.
Precisely. The architect can now use AI to write the boilerplate syntax and then use serverless environments like AppScript to entirely eliminate the friction of managing servers and scaling authentication. You're trading the agonizing complexity of traditional programming for the elegant precision of business logic.
So the architecture now allows you to exploit the specific, boring inefficiencies that are created by the corporate scale of the giants, but you do it without carrying their massive infrastructure burden. Let's put a face on this pain then, and look at what the architect is actually competing against. Because you aren't really competing against another piece of software.
No, you are competing against human desperation and something the book calls shadow IT.
Shadow IT, that's your primary competitor.
It is. Consider that logistics manager who spends 2 hours every single Monday manually copying CSV files from a shipping portal. They're logging into 3 separate systems and then consolidating that entire mess into a master inventory sheet.
The pain is boring. It's just copy-paste. It's drudgery.
But the operational risk of a catastrophic stockout because of a data error in that process is immense.
And that logistics manager is relying on a workflow built entirely on shadow IT. These fragile, unsupported systems that are just cobbled together using VLOOKUPs, old macros, and single-file spreadsheets.
And that's the ecosystem of pain you're stepping into. That workbook is likely named something like Final V3 Fix to Really Final.xlsx.
I think I've seen that file.
We've all seen that file. And it was probably built by a guy named Steve who left the company 5 years ago and whose phone number no one has anymore.
Oh, man. The multi-million-dollar business is depending on a single, terrifying workbook that crashes constantly and is fundamentally non-auditable.
I think everyone listening who has ever worked in any kind of business environment has seen Steve's spreadsheet. It is the single point of failure that everyone whispers about, but no one dares to touch.
So the architect's add-on, their microsys, becomes the robust, supported, serverless, and auditable replacement for Steve's terrifying custom-coded empire.
You are competing with Steve, and Steve is long gone. And crucially, the company has already proven its willingness to pay.
How?
By dedicating hundreds of hours of expensive manual labor every single month to the problem. They're already spending money to solve it. They're just solving it poorly.
So the goal is to observe the market's revealed preference, what they're actually doing to solve the problem over its stated preference, which is what they say they might buy.
Exactly. You don't ask, would you pay $49 a month for an automated sink? You just observe them spending 2 hours a day in agony, and you confirm that the pain is acute enough to trigger a purchasing decision the moment they see the relief.
Because the revealed preference is the $92 million they lost, or the hundreds of hours of labor they're already spending. That is the true cost of the status quo.
And your product, priced correctly, is simply a discount on disaster.
Okay, let's ground this in some hard numbers. Let's demonstrate the thesis with a specific case study that really proves the power of the boring sink.
The Blueprint site's a great one. It's a very simple Google Sheets add-on called Gorilla ROI.
Gorilla ROI.
And it targets that excruciatingly boring, messy, repetitive friction point we mentioned earlier. Pulling critical sales and inventory data out of Amazon Seller Central, which has a famously difficult API to wrangle, and synchronizing it directly into a Google Sheet. It just solves that specific, mind-numbing reconciliation task for Amazon sellers.
Okay, so a very focused, very boring task.
Yeah.
What is the compounding financial return for solving this single, focused, boring friction point?
This singular focused solution generates an annual revenue of over $276,000.
Wow, $250,000 a year.
That's one focused tool, serving a niche that the giants deemed too small, built on modern, low-code infrastructure, and it's replacing shadow IT. That figure, nearly $300K a year, illustrates the core theory perfectly. It is not a visionary product. It is essential, reliable infrastructure.
And that revenue has to be compounded, right? Because once that tool is integrated to the core workflow, once it's synchronizing your inventory or calculating your profitability, it becomes deeply, deeply sticky.
Of course.
It's no longer a discretionary tool. It becomes an indispensable piece of cheap insurance. You can't just rip that out without risking the entire integrity of the business.
The buyer is not purchasing software. They are purchasing reliability. They're purchasing the cessation of anxiety. And this fundamentally moves the purchase decision from the highly discretionary marketing or efficiency budget to the absolutely essential infrastructure or liability mitigation budget.
You are selling the structural integrity that Steve's spreadsheet lacks.
Yes. So this brings us to what the book calls the architect's mandate. What does this all mean for you, for the listener, the developer, the consultant?
The takeaway.
The takeaway. You must cease acting like a freelancer selling time and definitively start acting like an architect selling systems.
That shift. From the coder, who is trapped by the cursor, selling their labor, to the architect who commands intelligence, transforming a deep understanding of boring pain into a scalable financial asset. The book says that shift is non-negotiable for building genuine wealth.
It is. Your product is not about saving the user 10 minutes. That's a low-value proposition that's easily dismissed. It is about selling insurance against catastrophic failure and selling sanity. The ability to sleep at night knowing the numbers reconcile.
You have to find the pain points that trigger a high willingness to pay, or WTP, for that relief.
Exactly.
So we've established that the pain must be acute. We're talking audit risk, stockouts, payroll errors. But how do we tactically translate that acute pain into a high willingness to pay? How do you actually calculate that elasticity of demand?
The WTP is directly proportional to the perceived cost of the status quo. It's that simple. If the spreadsheet error costs the user $92 million, or it risks an entire quarter's sales due to an inventory stockout, then a $49 a month subscription is immediately viewed not as a cost, but as a discount on the cost of failure.
So you have to frame the product as the antidote to the chaotic, error-prone shadow IT systems they're currently trapped within.
The goal is to identify a problem where the user would literally pay anything to make the pain stop.
So the architect leverages the fear. But to justify that price point, to justify that high WTP, the product has to deliver more than just a simple macro. It has to deliver professional-grade structural integrity.
Absolutely. And this is the critical technical part. This is what differentiates the solo founder from a hobbyist coder. The solution cannot merely work, it must be resilient. This is where the technical details from the Bohr Ratings Problems blueprint become core business drivers, particularly when you're operating within serverless ecosystems like Google Apps Script.
Okay, for our developer audience, this is where we need to dive deep. When you're running critical automation tasks in a platform like AppScript, you hit inherent limits. So what are the key architectural decisions you need to make to guarantee that reliability and actually sell that insurance?
The most famous limit, the one everyone runs into in the Google ecosystem, is the 6-minute execution wall.
The 6-minute wall.
If your script takes longer than 6 minutes to run, it is summarily terminated. It's just killed, often in the middle of a critical database operation. So the problem you're solving, say, syncing 50,000 inventory items, that might take 12 minutes.
So your script is going to die halfway through.
It crashes halfway through, and you end up with corrupt, partially synced data, which is actually worse than the original manual problem you were trying to solve.
So how does the architect sell a robust system when the platform itself imposes this arbitrary time limit?
By architecting for resilience. And the core strategy for surviving the 6-minute wall is something called trigger chaining.
Trigger chaining.
Instead of writing one massive script that tries to process everything at once, the architect breaks the job into small, manageable batches. So say you process 5,000 inventory items at a time. After each batch completes, the script explicitly sets a timer or a trigger to call the next batch script 6 minutes later.
So you're effectively chain linking these short, stable executions into one long, resilient workflow.
That's it. It makes the process modular and, crucially, restartable. If the third batch fails for some reason, the system knows exactly where to pick up. It prevents the catastrophic failure of the entire process.
And that is the structural integrity you're selling.
Precisely. That resilience is absolutely non-negotiable for high WTP products. But there is another layer of critical infrastructure, particularly around data consistency, which the developer must master. It's called lock service.
Lock service. It sounds technical, but we need to connect it directly to that business value of sanity.
Lock service is the digital mechanism that guarantees your payroll doesn't double process the same check, or that your inventory doesn't accidentally count the same item twice.
Ah, okay.
In a production environment, especially serverless environments, scripts can often run concurrently. So imagine two different user accounts try to update the same critical spreadsheet cell at the exact same millisecond. If you don't use lock service, you will inevitably end up with data corruption. The cell only registers one update, or worse, some kind of corrupted merge of the two.
So the script isn't just executing, it's placing a temporary digital traffic cop at the entrance of a critical resource.
That's a perfect way to put it. Lock service ensures that when one script is writing data, it acquires a temporary exclusive lock, forcing all other simultaneous executions to wait, just briefly, until that data write is complete. It sounds like a minor technical detail.
But it's the difference between a system that guarantees data consistency and Steve's old macro that will eventually lead to a corrupted inventory account.
Exactly. You sell that guarantee. The technical mechanism is just the receipt for it.
And that level of reliability is what moves the purchase from convenience to essential insurance. When you charge $49 a month, you are charging $49 for the structural integrity of the lock service that is preventing data corruption.
This is the genius of the architect's approach. You are using professional-grade techniques, trigger chaining, lock service, robust error handling, to replace a chaotic system that was built by someone with no professional engineering standards. The complexity for you is a one-time investment in the initial architecture.
But the relief for the user is recurring and absolute.
Yes. And this leads us directly to the final strategic thought on monetization and freedom. We're moving away from the traditional model where you earn revenue based on time or features and towards revenue based on leverage and systemic relief.
The freelancer is trapped, trading time for money, hitting that linearity wall.
But the architect, by focusing on boring, essential infrastructure fixes that people will pay anything to acquire because they fear the consequence of using the status quo, they create predictable compounding revenue. The ultimate payoff here is not just the monthly check, though that is the immediate sovereignty.
You're talking about the ultimate exit strategy.
I'm talking about the liquidity event. Because this revenue is stable, it's compounding, and it is decoupled entirely from your time, you are building an asset that is inherently sellable.
Right.
A larger company, maybe an enterprise SaaS competitor or a holding company, they will look at that stable, predictable $276,000 ARR built on boring infrastructure, and they will pay a massive multiple for it.
You transform stable monthly revenue into a massive one-time payout.
Achieving true economic sovereignty.
That is the definition of leverage. Find the messiest spreadsheet, identify the fear, automate the boring part with structural integrity using tools like trigger chaining and lock service, sell the stability and the sanity, and then walk away with both the recurring revenue and the ultimate liquidity event. The lesson here is crystal clear. Stop looking for the next exciting social network. Go find the nearest ticking time bomb named finalv3fixed.xlsx and replace it with reliable, boring infrastructure. That wraps up our deep dive into the boring problem theory. And the question you should probably mull over this week is a simple one. What catastrophic boring problem is currently keeping your customer base awake at 2 a.m.?
Because that is your next microcess.